Hello viewer and welcome to this show is the Bible Journey. Very glad that you have joined us today for our discussion, and with me on set to help us analyze this particular book, and of course the book is Exodus and the chapter is 23, is Pastor Peter Nyaga.
Thank you so much, Ratemo.
And Pastor Dan Abuya.
Pleasure being here, thank you.
And Pastor Kabira Wakabira.
Thank you.
Let's have a word of prayer as we begin our discussion today. Our mighty and everlasting Father, thank you for your love and care and protection. Thank you for this special opportunity that we should learn from your inspired word. We pray that it may have an effect in our hearts and draw us closer to you. Be with us from the beginning to the end. Be with our viewer. In Jesus' mighty name we pray.
Amen.
Amen. Now remember that you can always give in your comments and ask your questions through the social media pages that are indicated at the bottom of your screen. Now let's go to our study, and we are studying the book of Exodus, and the chapter is 23, Justice for All. And just as I may read in verse 1, the Bible says, "You shall not circulate a false report. Do not put your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. You shall not follow a crowd to do evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after many to pervert justice. You shall not show partiality to a poor man in dispute." So the Lord is now concerned about being a justice for all, and especially when it comes to the aspect of being a witness of anything that happens. Right. And I don't know, why should the Lord be so particular in terms of when you want to be a witness, that you shall be very unpartisan and make sure that you give the right information?
Right. This is the last chapter, where the expansion
of the law.
Mm-hmm. It's going to end here, and then after that, now we're going to start getting into worship, protocols for worship. So really, this is an expansion of the Decalogue. And as you can see there, we are now expanding on the 9th commandment. The previous 2 chapters has been an expansion basically of all the others. Now here we're talking about the Sabbath, we're talking about the 9th commandment, that is of you shall not bear false witness, and also coveting. It's also being expounded on here. So really, that tells you how important this is to God, and also to the well-being of his people, this particular 9th commandment, such that once again, the Lord takes time to expound on it, perhaps to bring out clarity on it. So if you see, not only verse 1, you continue down, don't follow a crowd to do evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute as to turn aside or pervert justice. So all this is trying to say that if you're going to be my people and holy as I am, then truth has to be your guide in every single interaction, in your dealings, in your contracts. Your fellowship must be characterized by truth, by fairness. So
right. And Pastor Nyaga, what do you have to say on that?
Yeah, I see verse 1, of course, down to verse 9. It brings us to an end to exposition or more explanation, the notes on the 10 commandments, beginning 5 down to 10. And I think basically, like if you check verse 1 to 3, it shows commands in respect to the law, and especially warning not to seek for conveniences or to fall a crowd in doing something. You need to be consciously aware of what is right, and then keep the law within its spirit, not within its letter. I think, to me, that's what I see as a matter of continuation of what we've been discussing in previous shows from chapter 21.
And Pastor Kabira, how applicable is this to our current situation, especially when it comes to issues of mob justice? And you might meet people beating a person and they are saying it's a thief. and then you haven't ascertained the same. I've seen this happen in our towns, and so how applicable is it to our situation?
Well, especially in a Kenyan setting, I think we discussed this in the previous chapters. Let a judge be able to do the duty that requires him to be able to do.
Yeah, yeah.
We cannot both be judge, executor, and witness at the same time. I think only God is able to do that. So the whole idea is based on, you may have witnessed, but let somebody else judge, and then the execution of the punishment should be, communal and something like that. So in the end, for me, it's just common sense. God is giving laws that if we'll just keep quiet and think about it, it'll just be common sense in the end.
And I want to add also, the opening chapter of Psalms, the very first Psalm. It is trying to bring the spirit of this law. You see, when you go to testify, to give false witness, a false testimony against your neighbor, who is, remember, the foundation of all these laws is that you are my people. These are God's people.
Yeah.
It connects it with your attitudes towards the law of God. As it says, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. So of course it gives what the implication of that is, which we've already read, that if you keep these laws and commands, you shall be blessed and a prosperous people. So there's a neat connection here with when you associate yourself with people who are malicious against others. That shows that your heart is not quite in tune with the desire of God for you. Or else you will be delighting yourself in the law, and you will not be bearing false testimony. You will not be muddying, when disputes come about. Because oftentimes people do this. People bear false testimony, perhaps out of convenience, or perhaps out of an expectation for gain, which is not due them. So
I also wanted to say something on just the first sentence, first line there. You shall not circulate false report, that first sentence. To say that, in an event of a false information.
Like currently on
WhatsApp
you get a report and you start sharing.
This thing of forwarding and forwarding and forwarding, and some these things you forward is a report about personalities.
That's right,
we are not very sure. So this commandment, you shall not circulate a false report, takes care of anyone who, in that particular moment, he chooses to say nothing. You see a false report circulated, but you choose to say nothing. You do nothing about it. You're actually propagating that. Or if you choose to remain neutral, there are two sides given of a story. But you decide to remain sitting on the fence. You're still guilty of this particular commandment.
What if you're not sure whether it's true or not, and you remain on the fence?
No,
is that fair enough?
If you're not sure, you need to make a statement. I am not sure of this. But you remaining neutral,
by neutral you mean quiet?
Yeah, when you go quiet on it. For instance, let me give an example. I am talking about Pastor John in an ill manner. And Pastor Dan here comes to know about it. And he says, no, what you're saying is not right about Pastor John. But you hear about the same. Say, okay, I know whatever he's saying is wrong, but I don't want to be involved in these things. So you play a good guy. You don't want to be seen you are siding with Pastor or you are siding with Pastor Dan. So you choose to remain neutral so that you can be a friend of both sides. That is sin. You are actually propagating that. Because, the silence of a righteous person in the time when evil is thriving is very dangerous.
And you see, Nick, one thing we need to understand once again is we talked about the two wide partitioning of the law. That is the upward relationship and then the horizontal. Yeah, where we're talking about fellowship with your fellow man and fellowship with God. So, you know what this does? Verse 1 to 9, basically talking about false testimony, false reports, false witness. It messes up fellowship. It messes up relationships. And it's James chapter 3, who really put it perfectly well. The damage of a tongue. You know, this is gossip. We're talking of this is gossip. Yeah. In this verse 1, but really all the other verses, it's more or less, you can classify them as various types of gossip, bearing false testimonies, circulating false report. It messes up fellowship. There is no that spirit of love, that filial spirit of one family, being all of us, we belong to one God. It cannot exist if I feel maligned by what I have heard you saying about me, or by false testimony. So in other words, God is not going to achieve in the long run his agenda, his purpose, if you have got a broken community. Yeah. Because relationships have been messed up. Why? Because of false testimonies and witnesses.
Look at verse quickly. I want us to look at verse 5.
But I thought verse 2 was very important. Maybe just to highlight a few things there.
Maybe
you shall not follow a crowd to do evil. This is mob psychology. Everyone is doing it. I also I need to do it. Right. I need to belong. You know, if you're not following what we're saying, then you don't belong to us. Yeah. And these are very common things. And of course, we appreciate that this is actually what led to sin. That's because you see, Adam had a chance not to follow Eve. But he decided to follow Eve in her sin. Doing evil. And we continue to do that even today. We sit here as brothers, and you know what I'm doing as a person is wrong. But because we share same perhaps ethnic descent, or we share some common backgrounds, or there are things that bind us together. You support me in that which I'm doing without even you thinking about what am I doing these things. And so it shows a Christian who actually is not independent, and who his heart is not upright before the Lord. So I think to me this is very, very important, especially in our contemporary society today.
Sure. Let's look at verse 5. If you see a donkey, if you see the donkey of one who hates you lying under its burden, maybe I should start from verse 4. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall surely bring it back to him again. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying under its burden, and you would refrain from helping it, you shall surely help him with it.
Well, actually this ever happened to me. I now appreciate this verse, what it says. One day, a school bus is being driven so badly, and all of us are like, these people, even if it's driving, it is, these days with the school buses being yellow, especially here in Kenya. So when he's driving like this, and I'm thinking, then behind it's written, if driven carelessly, please call. And I just laughed and said, anyway, it's driven, but it's none of my business. To whoever, why would I call? It doesn't involve me. Believe me or not, we were joking with a few friends of ours. We were after doing what we were doing. So it passes. After less than a minute, we see screams. We hear about screams. What is it? A bus has fallen. And in it was school children. It was just here across KWS. And I was shocked. But you guys, you remember, we could have said this, but would it have made sense at that particular time? Only later to realize that, in the Kenyan system, if you take somebody who is sick and in an accident, you have to be obligated to do a lot. So everybody is refusing to be able to do that. Honestly speaking, after a few days, I hear my uncles say, we lost a child. It was so simple. We'll have just said, let me call. But I said, it's none of my business. At that particular point, it's none of your business. But you do not know, like James 4:17 says, therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him is sin.
I hope he repented.
That should shock many of us, because many of us, especially in Kenya, we don't want even to be witnesses. You've heard of the joke about you don't go telling the police I saw, otherwise you'll always be at the court saying,
That's right.
you know,
I saw.
we have that. But God is even telling us to be responsible even for the things that do not concern you. Because by extension, if everything belongs to God, and you are the steward God has given, then by extension it's
Everything
yours.
matters to you. Yeah.
Everything should be able. You cannot be able to sit back and say, it's none of my business. Technically, if you say it's none of my business, you're letting sin prevail.
Because if you help my kid and I help you, as then the society is good.
The society would have been good, only that, like I think Pastor Nyaga is on was alluding to, for evil to what? What is
To
it?
thrive.
To thrive, it needs the silence of
righteous.
good men.
Righteous, right.
That is what chapter verse 4 and 5 anyway basically are saying.
Further,
No.
this is also an expansion. This is actually coveting by reverse. This is reverse coveting. You know, you are like, huh? That's, I mean, that's a donkey, and
Yes.
why can't you help it out
Yeah.
if it's going to fall? You know, unless you're like, okay, and you see it going, oh, it's going, oh, then it gets in the, now it's no longer there. This guy is just dragging around with his donkey.
So let me bring you
No,
to
be-
verse
be-
8.
Before bringing us to verse 8, I think there's something we are not putting out clearly here. The issue here is not about the animal. The issue here is about your enemy. But the emphasis here. Because it says, if you meet your enemy's ox, not just if you meet an ox. And I want to believe that it's very easy, and it was very easy, it was very obvious for you to do good to anything that concerns your friend.
Yeah.
So they needed not any registration concerning how to behave, to treat your friend. But I think there was a need to legislate on how to treat your enemy and your enemy's property. And the principle I'm getting here about very clear is that actually how you feel about someone should not determine
Whether you
Right.
help them or
Your
not.
actions.
you know yes, I mean how you're right or wrong towards them. You should allow justice to flow.
Yeah, well, let me
That's what I'm
quickly
finding
go
here.
to verse 8. And you shall take no bribe, for bribe blinds the discerning and perverts the words of the righteous. Was it another version I was reading? You shall not take a gift because it blinds the... I don't remember which version was that, or which, if it's another verse. But let's talk about bribing, taking a bribe. It's so common. It's something that we are used to until in the society we live in right now. If you don't take a bribe, it's like you have a problem.
You know, still, once again, the law of God tries to, not tries, it actually touches on every single aspect of our life. Because God desires in the innermost parts of our hearts truthfulness and purity and integrity. Bribe giving is a disaster in most countries, in most nations. And, you know, like in our country here, some time ago, research was done. Youths were asked like how likely they are to give a bribe to get a service. And
Get a job.
most of, to get a job, you know, get a favor somewhere. Most of them said without thinking, majority, I mean, they'd give a bribe. It is almost like has been become nationalized. You are almost expected, you know, to give a bribe. So it's natural, and it's very unfortunate. But the Lord here is saying once again an expansion on the law of truth. That is not bearing false testimony. Law number 9. It's an expansion of it. It desires truthfulness. It desires sincerity. It desires, I mean, it doesn't matter what the consequences will be. You need to be truthful, because when you do that, then now God takes charge of the consequences.
Yeah, wow,
Right.
wow. And maybe I need to bring in Pastor Nyaga. on the
Just
same.
the issue of bribe, we so much castigate those people who bribe. But to me, I think the bribe makers and bribe receivers belong to the same lot.
Yeah. We are so ready to give the 50 shillings note
Yes,
to
yes.
avoid punishment from that traffic
Oh yes,
officer.
oh yes, yes. In fact, there cannot be bribe makers without bribe receivers.
Is it the other way around? There
Neither
cannot
can there be bribe makers without
receivers.
Yes, it's
Without
the same thing.
bribe
So
givers.
we want to be very fair. The issue of corruption, it cuts both sides. Many people complain about corruption because they don't have opportunities to be corrupt. Once they get, they do even worse things.
Oh, right here.
So we are so ready to condemn these big cases that we hear.
Yes.
Yet it's only a lack of opportunity on our side.
Right from home, my little daughter want to corrupt me to do a few things.
So you're a bribe receiver.
Yeah, I'm a bribe receiver.
So
and they also think it's right for me to do that because this is my daughter. So it is just in our bloodstream.
So
to
what should
me,
we do?
it's an aspect of it's sin. This is sin. Yeah.
Pastor Kabira, what should we do to overcome this national disaster or world disaster?
Is it what we should do or what we should become?
Okay.
Because for me, I will believe it's about becoming.
What should we become?
All right.
The insistence is on being fair, being just, and being right at all times, and letting God take care of the consequences.
That's right.
We're so afraid, and we rationalize over the do's and don'ts, the possibilities. You know, when you give a bribe per se, especially, let me say to the police, no, let me even come to the local setting. In the church, you know, we feel like bribes are out there. Here, inside, I want to be able to go because this leader comes from my region, so I think now I am favorable. I am lucky. Now finally we can be able to talk and things like that. But that is, it's the
bribe
person.
Is not all about
It's not in the government. It's not
just the
it's
money.
any favor that gives you undue advantage that you do not deserve. For me, that will be a bribe. No matter what scenario it is, many of us rationalize and say sometimes it's cheaper, it's easier, and what have you, but still it corrupts the person you are. And that is what God was fighting against. He was about being fair, being right, being just. These are the things God is asking of us, not necessarily the giving of money. I had a policeman who says he gives his tithes because it's like tax. You know, nowadays, bribe is so official, it is becoming like tax. So he just gives back, you know, to God. But I was like, no, that is not the whole essence. Do you know what you're balancing? A bribe leads to more. Let me say, you need to think in terms of a bribe always leads to something worse. It may be you're just taking 50 shillings to let a vehicle go. Then it causes an accident just because of a 50 shillings. It may be because you are giving a bribe so that you may pervert justice on somebody who was to get justice. What happens is the bad get free. What happens? They cause more bad. Right. So if we will think of it as the person you are supposed to be rather than what you're supposed to be, then it will help. Yeah. It's about our moral standing.
Okay, let's first of all take a short break and then we resume on the same discussion as we look at the laws of the Sabbaths and some annual feasts and of course the assurance of the angel of the Lord. So dear viewer, we're taking a short break on this discussion, but we'll be back shortly to continue with the same. Welcome back to this discussion. It's the Bible journey and we are looking at the book of Exodus and the chapter is 23. And with me, as usual, are our dear guests, that is Pastor John Kabira, Wakabira, Pastor Dan Abuya, and Pastor Peter Nyaga. Right. Welcome back to our discussion. Now, in verse 10 all the way to 13 is about the Sabbath. And it reads, 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its produce, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave, the beasts of the field may eat. In like manner you shall do with your vineyard and your olive grove. 6 years you shall do your work, 6 days you shall do your work, and on the 7th day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your female servant and the stranger may be refreshed. In it and in all that I have said to you, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of the other gods, nor let it be heard from your mouth. So here it's about Sabbath in two aspects. First of all, it's about plying your land for 6 years. Then on the seventh, you let it rest. And the purpose is that the poor may also eat from it, and what remains, the animals may feed from the same.
Right.
And then he reminds us also the issue of the weekly Sabbath, that you shall work on 6 days, and on the seventh, you shall rest, and everybody that you have, even the strangers. So maybe I need your comments on the same, about the two Sabbaths, especially personally.
I think we appreciate now that we, after Mount Sinai, 10 Commandments, we've been dealing with an exposition of the second lot of the 10 Commandments. You remember we said there are two segments of the 10 Commandments, that which concerns man's relationship to God, that is number 1 to number 4.
The upward.
Upward, and that which relates to man with man.
The horizontal.
Yes. And so we have been dealing with the horizontal from commandment 5 down to 10. Now we are getting into commandment number 4 upwards to number 1, which shows our relationship with God. And so from here now, we are transiting into worship issues now.
That's right.
We will center our discussions on worship issues. And now to bring out that very preliminary part of this is worship of Sabbath, because that is what God already has introduced. But we'll get deeper into it, seeing other things in the sanctuary, because as we get to chapter 25, he says, build a sanctuary for me. So Sabbath will be key in worship. That's why he introduces it here. And so we have these two Sabbaths now suggested, because early in chapter 20, we saw, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And he says, I created in 6 days, on the seventh day I have rested. But now we are getting another idea of a Sabbath for a whole year. And in Hebrew, this was common. It was sabbatical year, where after serving for some time, then you take a whole year of rest. It's called sabbatical here. And that is now what God is introduced and teaching them, so that they know how to keep the weekly Sabbath, the yearly, not the yearly Sabbath, but the sabbatical Sabbath, sabbatical year reminds them of the seriousness of Sabbath worship, because then they were supposed to keep their land fallow, not tilling, and you just leave it there for it to rest. So if you are able to leave your land resting for a whole year, it speaks more practically about the rest of Sabbath. And so to me, this is a way of God teaching, the teaching aid to enable people more appreciate the worship of weekly Sabbath.
The issue here is rest. He's not teaching really what is Sabbath, because he already talked about Sabbath. But he's emphasizing a human aspect of the Sabbath called rest. That even the land should be able to rest.
That's right.
Look at the list of the things he needs them to rest. In verse 12, he says, you should rest the ox, the donkey, the son of your female servant, the stranger may be refreshed. Even the things that traditionally, the people that traditionally are tired, should also take the Sabbath as what? As rest. In the end, he wants to teach about the Sabbath is not merely just the worship of God. Even physically, you need to be able to rest. Even land that we think does not get tired needs. If you go in agriculture, those who do agriculture, you know of rotation method, where you plant by rotation. You know, you plant here for several seasons, then another one you skip. Let the land recharge. Let get back its nutrients again. It's a good policy. It may look like why is God even legislating about these things? But in the end, he's teaching them, because they will get to Canaan. They will be people of agriculture, and that they will need to know. People who've been slaves for 400 years plus. Now they're in desert for another 40 years. They are not even farmers yet. They don't know even how. In Egypt, they used to plant by what? By flooding method.
That's right.
It just floods, and so for them basically. So he's teaching them life skills for next time. To be able to appreciate how much rest. So that way, they will never even have issues when they go to Canaan, because land has been sorted, the strangers, the ox, the donkeys, when everything gets rest, it's easy to work better. You become more productive. If you do not rest, you're not productive. So God, you can see, in essence, he's shielding them by giving them a law. They may think it's a law for now, but later, when their educational systems, when their cultural systems will have gone a notch higher, they will understand these things are beneficial for them.
And we keep on revolving around Sabbath, especially this weekly Sabbath, because I've heard them speak, and they are saying even the sabbatical year, that is to remind us about the weekly Sabbath. Well, maybe just remind us, why is it so crucial, this Sabbath issue?
Well, you know, number one, as Pastor Wakabira said, when you're being told about your land resting and you're in the desert, you know, that is,
it makes sense.
It's like it's out of place.
Yeah, because you don't have a land.
You don't have land, you're not farming yet here. But in that commandment itself is God's reassurance. You know what, guys? This is where you're going. So we are not even talking of whether we will get there. Now
so you're planning about
you will be there anyway, and this
as
is
if
what
we are in there.
Yeah,
right
as
now.
if you are in there.
In fact, Leviticus, we'll get the book of Leviticus, it repeats this and in a very elaborate manner.
Exactly. Yeah. So for God, they are there already. For them, all it was calling upon them is in faith, you know, to embrace it and be like, okay, you know, we are there. Yeah. Now, what does it remind us? The Sabbath, other than us having rest, is an expression of our trust in God's providence. That actually, you know, it's not out of your own effort that you keep moving. That we have our being, as Paul puts it, you know, we have our entire beings, we move and have our beings in Him. Such that when you're resting for a whole year, you didn't go out digging. Still, you can trust that God is going to be your provider. As Psalms 24:1 says that, you know, the earth and all in it, belongs to the Lord. So that is a very important aspect on Sabbath, which every week we are reminded that, you know what, you are not going to die because you rested on Sabbath, because after all, remember what Joshua fighting, thinking is the one fighting, but actually it's God, as Moses holds up his hand. Same scenario here. You may think you're working so hard in the course of the week to make provisions for your family, to sort yourself out. God is telling you, no, actually, I'm the one sorting you every single day. So this is an element of trust being shown over here. But then, finally, the less fortunate, they get an opportunity to be sorted. Because then, when the land is resting its fallow, they have now an opportunity, you know, the freedom
to eat of what is
eat out of whatever remnant is there.
Okay. Now,
but also I think it has something to show that God also loves and cares for these are the creation which normally does not have say. You know, it looks like human being has say in everything.
That's right.
And so many times, let's not be understood that actually resting is only for man so that we regenerate.
Exactly.
It's also intended to give other creation also time to rest, because you know we engage creation, we don't give creation any time to rest. So right. And that's why he was very particular. He would have said, you rest, but he goes ahead to say, your ox, anything in your house, because he knows how destructive the human acts are. So that commandment also guards or protects this other creation that human being uses in his life. It's very important for us to
there are 3 annual feasts here that he's talking about, from verse 14 all the way to verse 19. And it says, 3 times you shall keep a feast to me in the year. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. You shall eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded you, at the time appointed in the month of Abib. For in it you came out of Egypt, none shall appear before me empty. And the feast of harvest, the first fruit of your labor which you have sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field. 3 times in the year your males shall appear before the Lord God. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread, nor shall that fat of my nor shall the fat of my sacrifice remain until morning. The first fruit of your land you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk.
Right.
Now, there are 3 feasts here. And first of all, help us understand this. And is there an equivalent of the same currently that we observe as Christians, Pastor Kabira?
I will say, well, this is just a mention per se, and they are relatable in terms of the agricultural use. The feast of unleavened bread, the feast of harvest, and the feast of ingathering. All of them are agricultural oriented. So yes, they have some little equivalents, but these are not all the feasts that God had actually said. But they have been grouped together for a purpose, because they touch on agriculture. Pastor Dan has already said, look at what God is trying to tell them. How does the feast of harvest concern them in a desert at this particular time, and in gathering and all that? Well, of course, God wanted to contrast and shift their focus from idol worship, first and foremost. While they were in Egypt, every agricultural thing had an idol worship sort of. If you remember what we were discussing about, you know, the food was offered to idols, this and that was offered. So God has to translate that agricultural mindset, where it is worship of idols, to now worship of God. That's the beginning. Of course, now he gives small laws. When we'll get to Leviticus next episode 23, we'll discuss about the feasts that were now instituted for them. So for this one, it's not specifically about what feast to do and what. It's a mention of this feast, then they will be expounded later in a greater way, and their effect when they will come into place. That's the best I think I will be able to ask. But for now, it's touching on the agricultural, it's touching on their need to be able to think as farmers, to be able to think as producers, and to shift their focus from gods to now, instead of giving agricultural produce, worship of rain, worship of floods, worship of this and that, now the focus needs to change, the attention needs to change to God in heaven.
Before I come to Pastor Dan on the equivalence of the same to our current situation as Christians, and do we observe such things? Do we have an equivalence of the same? Let me first of all get the views of Pastor Nyaga.
Yeah, I think what I want to mention here is that now God is becoming central. He was an abstract God when he began the journey with him. His knowledge of him was so bland, it was not clear. But now he is taking shape, actually becoming almost the center of their life now. And so he introduces weekly Sabbath. He introduced a sabbatical here, but now he is now introducing to them 3 feasts, which are
actually national holidays.
National holidays,
National
but
holidays.
religious holidays,
Right.
which are centered on worship. So he is bringing himself at the center of their life. So everything they are doing, it revolves around God. That's what, because as we progress, of course, when we get the book of Leviticus, we find now these are 3, but now there will be 7. He'll go increasing this feast, just to make sure their minds are preoccupied with the knowledge of a present God who walks with them and whom they need to worship and pay homage to. So to me, that's why what I can say before Pastor.
Let him come in and give
us
us some equivalents of this in 2 minutes.
Right here. Let me use my first half minute to add on this. The feast was so many. Every new month, as in the first of every month, was it was a holiday. New moon, you know, each new moon, that's the beginning of each new month. Of course, the weekly now, some of these national holidays. The whole point was this. It was to saturate the worshipper with the presence of God and utter a total dependence on God as their provider. It was to remind them that in you don't have any ability at all to sort yourself. And so maintaining an attitude of worship and gratitude to their God was their only secret of success and prosperity. Not in their own strength, not in their own wisdom and all that. Now, you know, the equivalences today, maybe the only remaining relevant one that I could say is the last one, the Feast of Ingathering.
Okay.
Of course, we have got we have the unleavened bread, that is the Passover,
Passover,
which they
the
kept
communion.
celebrating. We have got harvest, that is the Pentecost. You know, it's equal with the Pentecost, you know, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit in the Apostolic Church. But then now, what we practice today, particularly as a church, Seventh-day Adventists, I know we all appreciate the Feast of Puts. That is how it's called elsewhere, the Feast of Ingathering. At the end of the year, it used to happen during the, you know, the 9th or the 10th month in the Hebrew calendar. And so it's what we call nowadays as the camp meetings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that,
The
that is what
meetings.
that is what we
Feast of
celebrate here.
Booths.
The
Okay.
Feast of Ingathering. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay.
So later on in Deuteronomy, it's also termed as the Feast of the Puts, because actually they were required to go out
Still
and camp, so that they be reminded, and camp in makeshift tents,
Okay.
not permanent. You know,
Not
once they
permanent.
got to Canaan and they have built panel houses, and now it's interesting when you read Deuteronomy 33, where Moses is saying, now when you are fat, your cheeks are fattened because of the milk and honey. Don't forget your God. You know, that's how he says, when you are and all that.
Yeah.
And you're living in nice paneled houses. I want you every year to go out and camp in a temporary dwelling for a whole week, just to remember that you were sojourners, just to keep before you that we are not here to stay still. Yes, we are in Canaan, but there is a real
home.
Canaan.
Canaan,
We are pilgrims, just by passing by. Yeah. And one important thing in finishing, they were to go before the Lord, not empty-handed.
Yeah.
In all these feasts,
They were carry
It's,
something.
that is right here. It says that, you know, none shall appear before me empty.
Empty-handed.
Because I've blessed you already. How callous can your heart be? What man of apathy with the Lord's blessing from slave, and now you've been glorified to this level. Then you just stroll. You stroll to the Lord. Like with you know.
You have that
Yeah,
thing.
so,
now,
right.
in chapter 13, verse 22, this is what was mentioned. And he did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. And then now when you come to chapter 23, from verse 20, he says this, behold, I send an angel before you to keep you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him and obey his voice. Do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if you indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I'll be an enemy to your enemy and an adversary to your adversaries. For my angel will go before you and bring you in to the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. Yeah, so there is an angel here whom he is promising. At least we saw the pillar of fire by night and the pillar of cloud by day.
And remember that was an angel.
Yeah, so he is actually now letting us know that this is my angel who is to go before you and lead you to the promised land. And one thing he mentions here, do not provoke him, because he will not pardon your transgressions. He will destroy you. Pastor Nyaga.
Just to mention that there is angel. We have incidents in the Bible where angels appeared. But there is a particular phrase repeatedly in the Bible, the angel of the Lord. So when you meet with the angel of the Lord, and that Lord is actually written with a capital L, it speaks of a different angel.
Is it so in the original language?
Yes, yes. So the concept,
capitalized?
the concept of the angel of the Lord, the Old Testament, signifies Jesus Christ. And also for viewers to appreciate that, actually, we talk about the orphanages. All the occurrences, incidents in the Bible where we see in the Old Testament, God appearing before people. Moses, Mount Sinai, it was Jesus Christ. It was Jesus Christ. So that's a discussion for another day, but the angel of the Lord is a term given to represent Jesus Christ in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
especially
verse
for
21, ascertains that, because it says he will. You see the where the pronouns they are used. It's capitalized. My name is in him.
in him.
So it's Christ.
It's
himself.
Christ. Okay.
Yeah, and for those who are Adventist and they follow through the inspired writings of Ellen G. White, also it could be good for them to know that from the Mount of Blessings, I can read just a quote here, just to confirm that she also agrees with our thoughts. Page 4-5, paragraph 1. It was Christ who, amid thunder and flame, and proclaimed the law upon Mount Sinai. The glory of God, like devouring fire, rested upon it. Quaked at the presence of the Lord, the host of Israel, lying prostrate upon the earth, and listened in awe to the sacred precepts of the law. What a contrast to the scene upon the Mount of Beatitudes. So the point here is the first sentence. It was Christ who, amid thunder and flame, and proclaimed the law upon Mount Sinai. So the angel of the Lord here, whose name, it says God's name is in him. Is Jesus Christ.
Jesus. Let's wind up this, and I just want to read this because now he assures them of where they are going, and assures them of his protection. And this is what he says in verse 28 and 29. And I will send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittite from before you. I will not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate, and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. Little by little I will drive them out from before you until you have increased, and you inherit the land. So maybe in a statement, Pastor Dan, then Pastor Kabira.
Well, my statement will be by reading verse 25. So you shall serve the Lord your God, and he will place your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of you. Really, this is the whole point of this section of passage. You are going in there, just obey me, you will prosper.
Well, Pastor Kabira.
The most beautiful angel I have ever seen, who will take away miscarriage.
Wow.
There will be no miscarriage.
That's right.
He will fulfill the number of your days. He will not allow the land to be barren. He will send hornets on my behalf. You know, it looks dramatic.
Canaan was full of mighty people.
And just try to imagine. He's basically doing everything for you. No miscarriage, so you'll be productive. The land is productive. He sends hornets. Then he will not drive out even your enemies quickly. You'll just, he will bring you little by little so that you're not overwhelmed. I don't know what else these people, I don't know why they will not want to look forward to something like this when an angel has been promised. But for me, though, I would cautiously say thank you, because Moses said, thank you, Lord, for the angel, but I also need something more. I need you to personally go. He did not understand that. That is in chapter 33, verse 2. But in the end, I want to appreciate that God had provided everything they needed, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, everything. Theirs basically was to set themselves just to go to Canaan. How many got there?
2. Wow.
That's now the issue.
Maybe I give you only very few seconds.
Just to appreciate that God is a very strategic person. He casts his vision, and also he communicates the strategy to achieve the vision. You see, like he's telling them, I shall use terror. You be with me, I'm going to use terror. I will throw them into fear and confusion, and you overcome them.
Yeah, and you occupy the land.
Yes,
and I won't just drive them out at once.
Yes.
I'll drive them out little by little as you increase to occupy the space.
Very strategic.
Wow. God is a God of strategy. Thank you very much, our dear viewer, for being with us on our discussion today. It has been nice having you on board as you listen to how the pastors analyze this particular chapter, and we hope that you are studying with us, and that you will also study the next chapter before we come back for the same next week. May God bless you. Until then, be safe.